Well, hello, my name is Elias Saratovsky. I am honored to be the CEO of the Birthright Israel Foundation. Thank you so much for joining or for viewing our second webinar on anti-Semitism on college campuses. 2 weeks ago, we hosted our first webinar, and we were so honored to have over 6,000 people either join us live or view the recording on YouTube. And we thought we should have a second one with 3 additional remarkable leaders on college campuses who are all proud Birthright Israel alumni that are not just leading Jewish life on their campuses, but I am confident will be Jewish leaders for the entire community in the next few years. Our mission at Birthright Israel is to build a brighter Jewish future by ensuring connection to Jewish communities, Jewish peoplehood, and to the state of Israel. And today, more than ever, our mission is incredibly important. We are looking to fuel courage and pride and confidence and connection, not only to the Jewish homeland, but to ensure that this generation of Jewish young adults understands the resilience of the Israeli people and brings that resilience back home to their communities so they put steel in their spine for the fight that we are all experiencing across the country. Before I introduce our 3 remarkable panelists today, I want to give you a quick update on what we're working on at Birthright Israel. Right now, this week, there are 1,500 Birthright Israel Onward participants and Birthright Israel Excel Fellows who are arriving in Israel for their summer Birthright experiences. They are all going to meet other Jews from across the country and across the world who will be in Israel with them this summer for this experience. We are also seeing applications for the Birthright Israel volunteer program soar right now. We're getting about 100 to 150 new applications every single day. Between November 2023 and March 2024, we were very proud to have 3,000 Birthright Israel participants come to the Jewish homeland to volunteer, to be part of the rebuilding experience that's taking part in Israel. And we expect this summer to have an additional 3,000 to 4,000 Birthright Israel volunteers. Upwards of 70% of these volunteers are previous Birthright Israel alumni. Many of them are coming back to Israel for the first time since their Birthright Israel trip, now to work alongside other Jewish young adults from across the world and Israelis in working on agricultural farms or in logistical centers, wherever they're needed to help most during this critical time. And finally, since May 1st, when we started our summer season, we've already had 2,000 Birthright Israel participants on our classic 10-day trip, and we expect an additional 6,000 to 7,000 participants this summer on a 10-day trip. I can just tell you, I'll be in Israel myself in about 2 weeks. I know many of you travel to Israel on a regular basis and particularly travel to Israel during the summer. It's always been incredibly meaningful to see the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem bustling with Birthright Israel participants. And now more than ever, we are hearing from Israelis who are feeling so grateful that Birthright Israel is back and back in full force, and that there are Jewish young adults that are willing to travel to Israel. And I also know firsthand, and you'll hear today, that the Birthright Israel participants who are coming to Israel right now are feeling incredibly grateful to have this opportunity to be in Israel, to have a reprieve from the anti-Semitism that is happening on college campuses. And on behalf of our entire organization, and on behalf of the 13,500 Birthright Israel participants who will be in the Jewish homeland this summer, I want to thank all of you who are investing in this work, investing in the next generation of our community, and they're making these trips possible. So thank you very, very much. I now want to introduce our panelists so you can hear from them, the real stars of our work. First, I want to introduce and welcome Tessa Veksler, who is graduating in just a few weeks from the University of California at Santa Barbara, and she's a 2020 Birthright Israel alum. Noah Rubin is a senior at the University of Pennsylvania and a Birthright Israel Excel Fellow. And finally, Jared Stone is a senior at Princeton University and a 2023 Birthright Israel alum. These three outstanding Birthright Israel alumni are Jewish leaders who've been proudly standing up for their community on their campus, and it is an honor to hear from them. And today's panel will be moderated by my colleague, Andria Aylyarov, our Director of Communications at Birthright Israel Foundation. Andria, take it away.
Thank you so much, Elias. It is great to have this panel, round two. We know it is just so impactful to hear from our Birthright Israel alums who are leading the fight against campus anti-Semitism. Jared, Tessa, and Noah, thank you for taking the time. I know many of you are starting summer break soon, so we truly appreciate you speaking with our stakeholders today. It's an honor to have our community hear your voices and for you to share your firsthand testimonials of what it's like to be a Jewish young adult on today's campuses. So I'd love to begin. Tessa, I'd like to open the panel with you. It was just last month that the Brandeis Center for Human Rights actually filed a civil rights complaint against UCSB for failing to protect you from severe anti-Semitic bullying, harassment, intimidation, and threats. And I'm sure that's just scratching the surface of what you've been through. I would love for you to share today how you feel the school has failed you as a Jewish student, but as a student who has rights, and also what gave you the strength to finish your term as student body president.
For sure. Thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you for having me. So, I mean, the lawsuit has been on, I think, on everyone's mind since it's come out, because I think that it's kind of a unique situation for an individual to be, going after their university for anti-Semitism. And something that I've, made very clear as I've talked about this situation is that this was after 7-8 months of harassment and me going through this on campus and trying to deal with it with administrators in a way that wasn't through a legal course of action. And I think that it was kind of this wall breaking down when I realized that even as someone who possessed the type of leadership role that I had, and I thought that I had maybe some type of leverage with administrators to kind of at least get some more understanding or protection, that it wasn't the case at all. And if anything, I think I had this rude awakening where I realized that Jewish students were being mistreated, no matter who they were, no matter what their role was, no matter how patient we were or how kind we were with administrators in waiting for them to deal with this process. So for me, it was just kind of this breaking point of this is not something that I don't think it's not going to affect me. I'm graduating. I'm not going to be a UCSB student anymore, but it's for those future Jewish students here to feel that they can be emboldened to run for student body president, regardless of what their identity is. And I think that it's really important for me, for UCSB to make a change for the future of their Jewish students on this campus, because what we're seeing right now, actually in student government, since me, I guess like finishing my term, is Jewish erasure, that people don't want Jews in student government. And you asked, what has kept me going? The Jewish people have always kept going. If, my ancestors could get through decades of pogroms and the Holocaust and, even 3,000 years ago, what our Jewish people had to go through as they were persecuted by virtually every other group that lived within our vicinity, I can handle a couple of college anti-Semites. And I think that more than that, it was about just showing that, my slogan has been, we're not going anywhere, because I believe that it's a part of our resilience, is showing that we will not be pushed out of a space, that we deserve to be in spaces that we work to be in. And I think that it sends a very powerful message. And at least I hope that other students feel inspired and motivated to, stick their ground in the face of anti-Semitism.
I would love, just so the viewers understand what you went through. I know if people are familiar with social media, you had like posters of your face slashed on
Yes.
campus. Is that correct? Like that's just, I mean, I
Yeah.
said it before, it's scratching the surface of what you had to go through just wanting to be a college student.
Right, absolutely. And I think that at the beginning of all of this, there was so much emphasis that was placed on you can go through this because you're a public figure. Or, I got this comment a lot of like, your strength makes it harder to protect you. And that, no, it didn't make sense that I would have a picture of my face slashed and that I wouldn't step down from my role. It doesn't make sense that people would tell me to run and hide, and instead I would expose myself even more on social media. It doesn't fit into this box, I think, that we try to fit minorities into, which is to act like a victim.
Yeah.
And I think that in many situations, Jews have risen above what we've been expected to do in situations where, we've been oppressed. So I think that that's a very important thing that's come out of all of this, is that, of course, it has not been easy. It's painful for any human being to experience what I experienced, and to have people endlessly harassing you because you're an easy Jewish target on your campus. But I think that despite all of that, it created a much bigger world for me. And I feel like, going online and sharing that experience just made me feel like there's thousands of Jewish people around the world that are holding my hand. So it's helped me get through it.
We are. I mean, people, I think
Yes,
that
I feel it.
those that are going into college, like all of you are role models for what Jewish students, look up to. It's absolutely incredible. Noah, I would love to go to you next. You earlier this year actually testified in front of the U.S. House of Representatives. On our last webinar, we had a few other students from Columbia and Cornell that also testified. Within your testimony, I just want to quote a few sentences that you said. Quote, you said, "The anti-Semitism we are seeing at UPenn did not start on October 7th. But since October 7th, it has certainly accelerated. Jewish students continue to experience harassment, threats, and even violence on our campus," end quote. I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit more about, like, what was it like being a Jewish student at Penn? Penn has been in the news a lot, and you were there. You have been leading this fight. And I'd also like for you, as a second part to the question, if you could just describe what you and fellow Jewish students have been doing to combat this anti-Semitism and the anti-Israel movements on your campus.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. What I was saying in the panel in front of Congress is completely true. And there's many of us, unfortunately, it was a smaller group before October 7th, who were trying to warn people that anti-Semitism is a real pervasive problem in our society, even when Jews have become very successful in many ways and very comfortable in many ways. It was clear that before October 7th, there were so many issues at UPenn. And if you look at other schools more, you have people justifying Intifada before October 7th. You have them praising terrorists before October 7th. You have them spreading lies about Israel before October 7th. You have them perpetrating blood libel against Jews before October 7th. And then October 7th happens, and October 7th wasn't only in Israel, it was around the world. Iran and its proxies have been emboldening and training people around the world, including professors, to indoctrinate our societies. And they've infiltrated in every single corner of what we would consider to be Western institutions. We are at institutions of higher education, but this is also true for companies, social media companies, governments, all sorts of things, community centers, libraries. Maybe if you're not involved with these things, you'd be surprised to learn that kids are being taught about how glorious it is to kill Jews in public libraries in some places. But to stay on UPenn, we had a conference in September of last year before October 7th that was a complete just it was like a networking conference for the most pro-Hamas people in the United States under the guise of a literature festival. I don't know personally what Roger Waters has to do with Palestinian literature, other than the fact that he is a well-known anti-Semite who puts a Jewish star on a air balloon pig in his concerts and dresses up as a Nazi. So that's how he got invited to speak to the audience. And so what we've seen since October 7th is the acceleration. We've seen huge protests turning into riots, turning into violence against Jews, turning into Jewish students aren't allowed here, turning into Hillel off our campus movements, and professors in many ways being behind all of this. You know, students come and go. So the professors are really the ones that are training these students and teaching them falsehoods, teaching them hatred from the first day that they step onto university campus. And at Penn and at many other schools, they're also organizing rallies that are explicitly pro-Hamas. You know, at Penn, we had chants for Al-Qassam, which is the military brigade of Hamas. We had, you know, at every school, chants for an Intifada revolution and for an Arab Palestine, and they're being led by professors.
Can you tell us more about the work you've been doing to combat this with your fellow students on campus?
Yeah, so we have to stand up. I mean, Tessa and Jared are amazing examples of what we've been doing, and great role models. I think on Penn's campus specifically, we've had a lot more engagement in Jewish life among Jewish students who maybe weren't as connected before, trying to get involved with the community for both good reasons and bad reasons. I mean, there are so many students who have lost all their friends because of this, because, you know, it turns out that your friend is an anti-Semite or your friend hates you just because you have a family member in Israel and you don't want them to be bombed. Or you're sitting in class one day and a professor cold calls you because you're supposed to have an opinion about Israel because you wear a Jewish star. And now you need a support group. You need somewhere to go where you're not going to be judged for being Jewish. And on the other end of the spectrum, we've also had students stepping up to fight this head on. You know, writing op-eds, calling out what the meaning of the chants are that we've heard on Penn's campus. Myself and a few other students are part of a lawsuit against the university. We've had, of course, speaking to Congress, many students speaking on the news. A big part of this fight is exposing the truth, because the truth is on our side. And unfortunately, the truth is scary these days. I think most people, and especially most people that aren't Jewish, that aren't confronted by anti-Semitism on a daily basis, don't really realize what's going on. And what's going on is the acceptance of violence as a form of peaceful protest and the acceptance of intimidation as a form of peaceful protest. And it's not only against Jews, it's against anybody that stands for Western values of democracy, of freedom. And these rioters that are on our campus that might only get a few seconds of news time to people that aren't Jewish are a constant in Jewish students' lives on campus. And they are growing up in a world where they can get away with it and where they are encouraged and they are awarded and they can take over buildings with no consequences. And if we don't get ahead of this now, nobody should be surprised when it becomes completely widespread.
Thank you so much. For sake of time, I want to go to a point you said about some of the professors, because Jared actually did some work regarding this at Princeton. So Jared, you're a senior at Princeton, and I think it was only a few weeks ago, you actually spoke at a protest outside of the Middle East Studies department with members of the Iranian community who stand against the regime. And so you've shared, you know, previously in conversation with me, like they are allies to you, and that the Iranian people who are against the regime truly understand what we're going through. I'd love for you to just shed light on this specific protest and how you were involved, And if you can explain more, also going back to Noah, about the importance of like fighting this battle and combating anti-Semitism from within like the Middle East studies departments, where the anti-Israel rhetoric has plagued our academic institutions. Can you share more on that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Andrea, Elias,
Always
Tessa,
good.
and Noah, of course. Thank you to all of you who joined this very important webinar. It's really an honor to be speaking to you today. So as Andrea mentioned, I was involved in organizing, and I actually spoke at a rally a few weeks ago on campus that I helped to organize in tandem with the local Iranian community that was directed towards the Middle Eastern Studies Department at Princeton, known as the Department of Near East Studies, where there are several professors who have direct ties and a very sordid past with the Iranian regime. I think it might be helpful to proceed by way of context a little bit, just because it's important that we understand that what's happening on the campuses did not just occur in a vacuum, and it represents the confluence of various philosophical, ideological, and cultural forces that have really created a volatile condition for Jews and other supporters of the West on campus. So, what we saw on October 7th with Hamas's terrible atrocities on Israel, of course, did not come from nowhere. Hamas is a proxy of the Iranian regime. As Noah mentioned so correctly, the Iranian regime is truly the head of the snake. Hamas is one of its proxies. It also funds such organizations as Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, which is having some conflagrations with Israel at the moment. It funds the Houthis that are blocking access to the Strait of Aden and the Red Sea and the entire kind of area there that's very critical for shipping routes for countries across the world. The Iranian regime is the leading state sponsor of terror in the world and has been for several decades. And it is, of course, the main culprit of the total destabilization that we've seen across the Middle East. And so we have that geopolitical reality. And then we also have the fact that, as Noah once again mentioned, Iran and its various supporters throughout the Middle East, most importantly, Qatar, have been pumping billions of dollars into American universities within the past few decades in an effort to subvert American values and to promulgate their own ideological outlook. And this outlook is very, very much steeped in anti-Western, anti-American, anti-Israel, and of course, anti-Semitic values. And so this has been going on for a very long time. At my school, Princeton, our Department of Near East Studies has been one of the probably most prominent recipients of this funding from the Qatari regime. And in fact, I'll proceed to tell you about two members of the faculty there who have very direct ties with the Iranian regime and whom we protested at our recent rally that Andrea just told you about. One of the members of the faculty of Princeton's Near East Studies Department, which is, of course, our Middle Eastern Studies Department, is an individual by the name of Sayed Mousavian. He was the former Iranian ambassador to Germany, and he was in his post when there was an assassination of Iranian dissidents at a Greek restaurant called Mykonos in Berlin. And it is widely believed, and based on all available evidence, it is most likely true that he played a role in that event. And so he works at Princeton right now. He's been let off scot-free, and he has his comfy gig at Princeton, I suppose you could say.
And if you don't, for the sake of time on this, I
Yeah.
would love for you, like, how do we fight this?
Yeah.
Like,
So,
why is it important for Jewish students to stand up against some of the faculty on these campuses who are teaching your peers?
yeah, I'll go through the context very quickly, and then I'll
Sure.
get to that question. The other individual I want to quickly bring up is the head of the Near East Studies Department, who knows several of the hostage takers from the 1979 Iranian hostage crisis. And so what we've seen is that this is actually translated into their curriculum. We saw even before October 7th that the department sponsored a class that included a book called The Right to Maim, which was steeped in anti-Semitic blood libels and other tropes like that. And of course, what we've seen with October 7th and the subsequent protests is that I suppose you could say that the neo-Marxist, post-colonial, and other ideologies that have fomented these protests have been abetted by the fact that you have departments like the Department of Near Eastern Studies that is literally pouring gasoline on the fire. So why is it important for us to stand up to this? It's important because this is an institutionalized form of anti-Semitism that has been there for very long. And we really need to focus on solutions right now. It's, of course, imperative that we go out and we counter-demonstrate these protests that we're seeing. But it's also important to understand that the tentacles run very, very deep within universities like Princeton. And so we need to do whatever we can to be vigilant about that and to stand up against these nefarious departments.
Thank you so much. I want to go to the next question, which I think Tessa and Noah both touched on. Noah, there was an Israel rally at Penn, I believe it was last semester, and you actually were holding the megaphone and you yelled into the megaphone, Jewish students are not going anywhere. And I think you even prefaced it and you said, like, our siblings deserve spots at these institutions. Can you, and I think all three of you can also speak more about this, why do you think it's so important that you remain at these schools and stand your ground in this fight? I mean, Tessa, you are graduating, but you hit on it earlier that you want to make it safe for more Jewish students to attend your school. So Noah, why do you think it's so important in this fight against anti-Semitism that you don't transfer and go elsewhere?
Well, first of all, huge kudos to Tessa for being the one to post one of the original infographics on Instagram saying we are not going anywhere.
Mhm.
It's important because these institutions are not just some non-important thing on the fringe of American society that we don't need to worry about. But the truth is that all of these schools create the next leaders of our world. And so if we give up on them, we're doing two things completely wrong. The first is we are not going to be able to be the leaders of the world in the same way. We're not going to have the same access to opportunities. Me personally, I'm very fortunate to be in a dual degree program studying engineering and business. And it was like my dream program for my career path. And why should I have to give that up because I'm Jewish? And the second reason that's arguably more important is because we can't allow the next generation of leaders to be indoctrinated in the way that they have been indoctrinated now for so long. These professors that Jared was talking about, it's not that they just have a cushy job doing research in some back office and they should really be in the international court and be being prosecuted for the crimes against humanity that they maybe did in the past, because in some cases that might be true.
Yeah.
But in general, there are so many professors across the country that it's not that they're just sitting in the back office doing nothing all day and they're taking a paycheck. They're actually indoctrinating the next generation of leaders. And then when you end up with politicians and news reporters and CEOs that stand up not only against Israel, but against democratic values, against freedom, and justifying rape, we can't be surprised. Why should we be surprised if the next, God forbid, CEO of some big company justifies rape when in college he was being taught by a professor who said that rape is resistance?
Right.
We need to stand up to it head on. Otherwise, we really can't be surprised when we end up with leaders who don't share the same values that we do.
You make great points. Tessa, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Noah answered it very well. I think what I have always said is that having a Jewish or pro-Israel presence on campus creates dissonance for people. It's not even about, I think it's not always about like the fight. It's not always about being the loudest people in the room. Sometimes it's about being a student in a classroom, and if a professor brings up something, being a different voice, raising your hand and asking a question can be a very powerful tool. I think that that's kind of what sets us apart in this movement, is that we are inquisitive people. We are, trying to find the intelligent and moral and ethical truth. And I think that being truth seekers helps. I think it humanizes us. I think that people appreciate the way that we handle ourselves, even in situations that we should be extremely frustrated and angry in. I think that for me personally, working in student government and being someone who has a level head is what has humanized me as a Jew and as a Zionist to the non-Jewish community that I work with. So I think that's why it's important. I think half of it is being there to really, you know, to fight and to be open about our views and who we are. And the other half is just being a student on a college campus who contributes valuably to non-Jewish spaces, and making sure that you wear many hats and you happen to be Jewish. And if anything, being Jewish is an asset to who you are and to your positions.
Thank you. So this is actually a great leeway. We had a question from the audience, and I think there's probably some prospective parents of, you know, young adults going into college, considering going on one of our many Birthright Israel programs, and any one of you can take this question, but how do you think is the best way that an incoming, you know, Jewish student could prepare for what they might see, hear, or experience at a college campus this fall? Anyone is welcome to take the question.
I can jump in.
Thank you.
I think for incoming Jewish students, you should be proud of who you are. You should, you know, if you grew up Orthodox, you should come in as an Orthodox Jewish student. If you grew up Reform with, you know, a very strong connection to Jewish values, you should come in with that and bring that into whatever space you go into. I think you should, you know, just like any advice that I would give to any college freshman, you should try many things. You should join clubs. You should get involved with performing arts groups. You should apply for pre-professional clubs. And, you know, if it's relevant, something from your Judaism or your connection to Israel is relevant, bring it into the room, and be proud about it. Because we cannot live in a world where it's accepted to hide your Jewish identity or hide your connection to Israel when you want to participate in society. And so from that perspective, you should bring your full identity to every space that you go into. And then from the other side, you should push yourself to take your Judaism and take your connection to Israel a step further when you come to college. Because for the first time, you're not going to have your parents or your community necessarily to push you to be Jewish or to go to Shabbat dinner, or to go to holidays. And so I would encourage you to go to the Hillel, go to the Chabad. It's not only an amazing way to get involved and to meet people, but it's super important that we continue to strengthen these Jewish organizations on campus, if not for the sole reason that we need Jewish students on campus for the reasons that Tessa just outlined. And this is how we are strong there. This is how we come together. You know, and may we only come together on happy occasions. That's what we always say and we wish for. Unfortunately, now it's super important that you join your school's Student Supporting Israel chapter or your APAC group or your Stand With Us and get involved with fighting the anti-Semitism on campus. Everybody, you know, has their own role to play. Some people much more public facing, other people in a more private way. Some people, if all you can manage to do is speak on one-on-one with friends, that's just as important as getting up with a megaphone in many cases. And so there are many ways to get involved.
Yeah, I'd love to go. Oh, go ahead, Tessa.
I was just going to say, I also think that's important. And I also think that it's important that the Jewish support in those groups is there. And what we're seeking right now is for the non-Jewish world to understand us. And I think that on campus, something that I really valued about being in student government is that I didn't feel like I was screaming into an echo chamber. I didn't feel like I was screaming to a bunch of people who already were on my side. I felt like, to be honest, the people that I spoke to majority of the time were people that had a lot of questions. And that's why I think that, you know, listen, during my first couple of years, I was in student government throughout my entire time at UCSB. But in addition to that, I was on the boards of SSI and Chabad. But I think that it's really important, if you're going to be involved in Jewish advocacy and you want to be able to take it a step further, to really see how you can get involved in things that don't have to do with this. Because a lot of the time, I think we are seen to almost be single issue people, that we don't care about other things, and that's not true about Jews historically. We've aligned with many other movements, with many other minorities, and I think it's important to continue that, as hard as it may be, when we feel that groups turn us away because of our identity.
Yeah.
When you don't succeed, try again. We don't have an option, in my opinion, to not do that. And I just want to leave, I guess, for incoming students,
Yeah.
there's practical advice I give, and then there's, the internal advice that I give. Regarding practical advice, all the things Noah said, 100%. It comes to figuring out the people that you look up to and trying to emulate it. It means joining your Jewish community. It means educating yourself before you get to campus, so that you can feel that you can try to engage in really complex conversations. And then the other part of it is the internal trust that you have of yourself, knowing that you're standing on the right side of history, knowing you have moral clarity, knowing that as a Jewish people, we are historically resilient, and that no matter what, for tomorrow and the next day and the next year, there is going to be a state of Israel, and there is going to be a Jewish people. So no matter how many encampments there are and how many people there are that are shouting at us that we are not going to exist, it's simply not true. We will continue to exist. And internally, we are built from a very young age as Jews with the value system that it takes many people decades to find. And I would really encourage, especially incoming Jewish students, to reach into that part of themselves and to stay true to that, despite the many negative emotions that we may feel on campus when we're faced with anti-Semitism.
Thank you. There's one more question that I want to get to before we end, because we're running close on time. And Noah hit on this a little bit. So for many young Jewish adults in the United States, one of the first independent decisions they make as a young Jew is to go on a Birthright Israel trip. And for the majority of them, when you're talking about complex conversations, that knowledge comes from a firsthand Israel experience that many people do not have until they go on a classic 10-day Birthright Israel trip. In a recent study from Brandeis University through April to December 2023, it actually found that Birthright Israel participants' involvement in Israel activism increased by 77% compared to non-participants, those who have not gone. I love, just because you are each, we are so proud to count you amongst our 850,000 plus alums. Noah, you have been just an incredible example of a Birthright Israel Excel fellow. I'd love for you to share how your firsthand experiences in Israel through our programs have played a role in your life. We have about 2 to 3 minutes left. Tessa, Jared, would you like to speak briefly on this?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So I went to Birthright in December of 2022, going into January of 2023. I've also had the opportunity to spend several months there doing venture capital work. I think that my main takeaway from all my time in Israel is that there's an intangible sense that you get, not only from trying the foods there and going to the various historical sites, and not even just from the historical and cultural connection that you feel when you go to Israel, but there's really an ethos. There's a way in which the Israeli people compose themselves and stand up in the world that is something that we desperately, desperately need. And when we see this culture of victimhood and nihilism permeating our campuses, I think it's more important than ever before that we take a page, that we learn this lesson from the Israeli people, that despite all the hardships that they are faced with on a daily basis, they get up and they're resilient, and they stand strong and they stand together. So let them serve as an example to all of us, and I hope that they can continue to serve as an inspiration for everyone here and elsewhere who needs it. Thank you.
Tessa, Noah, do you care to answer?
I definitely agree with that. And just to build on that, I think that as an American, the least that I can do is support Israel here on the ground. I'm not in the Israeli Defense Forces. I'm not on the ground volunteering in Israel at this time. And the least that I can do to fight for our people there is to be a very, very proud, outspoken Jewish American Zionist. I also think that you cannot educate an uneducated person about Israel without sharing actual facts and information other than the fact that we feel connected as Jews. And I think that part of going on Birthright is seeing something with your own eyes so that no one can ever tell you that you didn't see it. No one can ever tell you that, you know, if they're sitting here on an encampment on a college campus and they're a white kid from wherever, them telling you that, you know, I know that the West Bank looks like this and I know that Tel Aviv looks like this. Well, I've actually been there and I've seen it with my own eyes. And I know that apartheid isn't real because when I go to a grocery store, I have a Muslim woman checking me out. So I think that that's a very big part of it, is knowing, first of all, arming yourself with facts. And second of all, seeing something, as you mentioned already, Andrea, the seeing for yourself, and being able to bring that experience back to your advocacy.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Noah?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The amazing thing about a Birthright trip is that you get to see the reality. You know, like today, there was a terrible report that came out that a rocket hit a playground in the north. And somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, that can't be true, da 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 da." I can tell them, you know, I was on my Birthright trip and I was in Ashkelon and I saw a playground that has a bomb shelter kind of like in the shape of a caterpillar so that it's fun for kids, but really it's a bomb shelter. And that's true that rockets hit playgrounds because Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever it is targets civilian centers.
Yeah.
You know, I can go when people say there aren't hostages. I can say my friends that I met on Birthright know the hostages or they know the hostage families. Or my friends that I met on Birthright have been evacuated from their homes in the north. You can't tell me that it's not really happening. You can't tell me that it's propaganda when I spend time with these people. And then if you're going to chant on my campus that you want to bomb Tel Aviv, we're not going to stand for that, you know?
Right.
And it's totally different when you've been on a Birthright trip and you go there and you see the reality. And not only for that reason, but Birthright also gives people a huge sense of Jewish pride and Jewish identity. Because for many people that didn't grow up in a Jewish community or that aren't so involved on campus necessarily, they go in for the first time in their life, being Jewish and being pro-Israel is kind of just expected and it's normal. And you don't have to constantly defend yourself. You can let your guard down a little bit. And understanding that that is a reality and that that is our truth as a people and that's what we deserve is a huge boost of strength for when you get to come back from that trip.
Thank you so much. We are actually almost at time. If anyone would like to hear more of Jared, we have some incredible articles from him on our website, and he speaks frequently for us, as we hope Tessa and Noah will have a chance to meet our community members in person. But I'd love to thank the three of you for taking the time and joining today. I think we really appreciate hearing your firsthand accounts, but also just more about your work fighting for the rights of Jewish students and our democracy in the Western world. So for everyone that has attended today, a full recording of this webinar will be available across our social media channels, and we will also be showcasing clips of this. And I think that we all, should uplift the voices of Noah, Jared, and Tessa during this crucial time for the Jewish people. I also encourage everyone here to strongly consider making a gift to Birthright Israel Foundation. There, as the three of them just said, there has just never been a more crucial time for young Jews to go to Israel and understand the strength of our people, but also just be in a place where they can breathe proudly as Jews. To make your gift, you can visit brif.gift/campus2024. And we thank you so much for attending this today. And we hope to provide many more of these experiences for our community and the greater Jewish community in the weeks and months to come. So thank you so much for joining us. And I urge everyone to please consider making a gift today. I think it's our duty to ensure that every young Jewish adult, especially those on a college campus, has the opportunity to, be part of the Israeli resilience. So thank you so much.